Hello and welcome to today's Claimversation. My name is Ashley Sneller, VP of Marketing at Benekiva, and I am joined by the one and only Krista Eger, our VP of Product. Krista, can you give us a quick intro into who you are and how you got into claims?
Sure. So I'm Krista Eger. I'm the VP of Product here at Benekiva. I've been at Benekiva for a little over 3 years now, but have spent my entire corporate life within claims, or some sort of claims itself. I started out in the call center and essentially worked my way up the chain, always knowing that I wanted to get into claims. So now I started as a claims examiner, and now I'm transforming the claims process instead of paying the claims.
Amazing. And I think that leads right into what we're talking about. We're talking about something that is very near and dear to your heart. I've heard you talk about it many times, but why it's important to transform claim processes and not just claim technology. Why is that a passion topic for you?
So I've watched great technology fail due to those bad processes more times than I'd like to count. I mentioned earlier in my career, I was the manual process. I did a lot of the work. I did a lot of fixing of those errors and chasing that paper. And then later on, I started to work in the transformation and in project strategy. And there was always this common thread within all of them, and that's technology doesn't fix broken thinking. So if you automate your chaos, you're just going to get that chaos faster. The real transformation improves outcomes for those people, the examiners, your beneficiaries, claimants, not just for the system. So technology will scale whatever you give it, good or bad. So that's kind of what pushes me forward and gets me out of bed every day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's you kind of just answered this question, but why is it so detrimental to take the manual process and just recreate it in a technology platform? Do you have examples?
Yeah. So manual processes, they're designed around human limitations, not necessarily your customer outcomes. They typically exist due to your legacy systems, compliance fear. Every department has that fear of compliance, and then also some of your workarounds just to get to your end goal. It's not necessarily that they're efficient. It's just you're doing them. They're necessary for that point. But when you start to digitize them as is, you start to hard code your inefficiencies. You lock in a lot of your risk. And then when you want to make changes later, it becomes exponentially harder. So if your process needs a human to remember what it is, it's already a broken process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That even ties in. I mean, we had Jess on a couple times ago to talk about correspondence standardization. And if you need a human to remember
Mhm.
which specific document to use versus a system that could do it like this, there's so much less room for error.
Yep, absolutely.
I guess there's a thread in this. I think a lot of times in insurance and in technology, we use digitization and transformation for the same concepts or same projects, but to you, it seems like they're different. How do you define them?
So I look at it as your digitization is doing the same thing, you're just doing it on a screen. So you're taking your exact process and you're making it digital.
Mm.
Transformation is questioning why that thing exists at all. So digitization may improve your speed, but transformation will improve your outcome. So if your customer experience doesn't improve during this process, or your examiner's job doesn't get easier, you just didn't transform anything. You just digitized an already broken process.
So taking that a step further, it seems like people are just in a hurry to digitize,
Mhm.
which they can, and maybe there's some transformation, but really what should happen first is transform first and then digitize what you transformed.
Correct.
Or if you're digitizing, transform with digitization in mind.
Yes, exactly. Say that 10 times fast.
Not on a live stream, but so you've worked with a lot of different carriers. What are some of the red flags that you've seen that show that a carrier is just copying that same manual process and digitizing it instead of transforming it?
Mhm. You hear a lot in the phrases. So you get into requirement sessions and you start asking questions, and you'll hear responses of, we've always done it this way, or a big one is compliance requires it. And then when you ask for proof or you ask for them to go to compliance, they can't provide that proof to back it up. A lot of it is just that's how we've always done it, or that's how we remember how to do it. And then, my favorite is we just need the system to match our current checklist. Some other red flags as we're bringing or configuring the platform, you get a lot of carriers that will start asking for too many required fields just in case, we might need this, or you have it for some sort of edge case that happens once every 10 years. And then a lot of duplication in reviews. You'll see that validation piece gets duplicated over and over again through different points, but there's no actual true added value to it. And then you have multiple handoffs without any clear ownership. So you're going from this person to that person and that person. Everybody's doing just a little piece of the puzzle. So when you see that, you see a lot of red flags, but primarily what you see is that fear is actually driving that design.
Yeah. So then thinking about, I'm a carrier, we're thinking about going through transformation and digitization, but we want to get there. What kinds of questions should I be asking to kind of uncover where those gaps might be?
Yeah, so there's a series of questions that matter the most. Some of the big ones that I like to ask, or I encourage carriers to ask, is, what risk does this step actually mitigate? Who's going to benefit from this step? Is it you or is it the customer? And then what the big one is, what happens if you just remove it? Does somebody come running? Do they start asking for it? And then your decision, what is it based on? Is it your policy? Is it regulatory, or is it just straight habit? And then the last thing you want to ask yourself is, if you were to design this process today, would you continue to do it this way? So if you can't answer any of those clearly and confidently, then that is a good step, a good candidate for removing that process.
That's big. I could see how having those kind of conversations could ruffle feathers. Let's say I want to go about making a change, but I don't want to ruffle feathers, or I mean, maybe need to a little bit, but how do you ask these questions in a way that helps real conversations happen and not just ruffling feathers or ego or anything?
Yeah, I mean, you will ruffle feathers no matter what. And that's okay. I mean, I go into it knowing that potentially might happen. But I express that this is curiosity and it's not accusation. It really depends on how you help to frame your questions. I do a lot of help me understand, or what were we trying to originally solve here, and is this true today? And the biggest one is just why. Why are you doing it that way? I also try to be very forward and let them know that I'm not questioning them. I'm just questioning the process and making sure that distinction matters. So you don't have some of the people getting upset that you're asking, or defensive.
Yeah, it's good. Just keep it curious. We're just trying to uncover. And honestly, it seems like as people would answer questions, a lot of it will be evident in the answer.
Yep.
It's good. I guess something that we hear a lot from examiners or people in claims that live it every day is that they can feel like the digitization or transformation is happening to them or just being pushed on them or at them. How can they feel more like they're a participant in it and not just kind of being handed
Mhm.
instructions of what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, effective change management is always something that you have to look into. You can't just expect people to go and pick up the platform and be fine with that job changing. But a big key is to bring them in early and actually listen to them. Those examiners are your subject matter experts. They know where the shortcuts are, where the risk really lives within that process, and they can tell you what slows them down. So if you make them the co-designers and not the recipients, you're going to have a better outcome. And then be honest with them. A lot of people think that transformation is going to replace their jobs, and that's not what it's about. It's about elevating their judgment and not wasting it on admin work of filling out spreadsheets and copying and pasting and doing things 10 different times just because your system or your process requires that.
That's huge. That's really huge. And I think again, it's the examiners and the people who live it have the best
Mhm.
insights into what matters. So we
Yep.
should be looping everybody in.
Mhm.
So I guess shifting a little bit, we've been talking a lot about process and kind of planning for it, but practically speaking, when we're talking about a true transformation, what are common patterns or pitfalls that you see across the industry in claims?
So there's a few. First, I see that fear of compliance will drive your overprocessing. A lot of organizations will add those layers just in case, even when there's no like true evidence that these steps actually reduce any risk. I also see the legacy workarounds that slowly turn into those hard requirements. It started as this temporary fix or this temporary process. And then because of that, it becomes institutionalized because no one ever really stopped to question it. You just continued to do it that way. You also see in that institutional knowledge, it just lives inside people's heads instead of out in the system. So some of those critical decisions that from those people that happen to be working on the claim, they're not able to actually do it without them. So that creates some sort of inconsistencies and a lot of risks in that claim process itself. And then the other that you see, everybody thinks their situation's unique, but most of what we see, everybody's going through the same problems. But having that mindset that you are unique leads to one of the bigger pitfalls. The teams start with those requirements instead of those outcomes. They ask, what does the system need to do, instead of what should the customer and examiner experience actually feel like. So when you start there, when you start with the requirements, you don't do your transformation. You're just rebuilding the past within the technology, kind of going back to that digitization versus transformation.
Yeah, it's almost like you're just doing the what and not the why.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. That leads really well to the next question I had for you. But if a carrier can just fix one thing or is trying to figure out the best place to start, what is the one process or one focus area that usually makes the biggest impact?
Yeah, it's your decisioning. So you need to figure out who decides what, when, and based on the actual data. So here's an example that we see a lot of times in many carriers. The examiner could make a pretty straightforward eligibility or payment decision, but they don't. Either the rules aren't very clear or there are too many rules. So that claim will get paused, it gets sent to a supervisor. Sometimes it's going back to QA to be reviewed, and then you see it kind of getting kicked back and forth. And it's not necessarily because it's complex. It's just because nobody's confident that they're actually allowed to make the decision. Mm-hmm. So when your decision logic is unclear, everything starts to slow down. You also start to see errors increase, and then you have people that are over reviewing just to protect themselves. So when you compare that to a process where the system clearly says, if these conditions are met, this decision is automatic. If they're not, here's exactly where we need that human interaction to happen. Suddenly you find that your examiners will move faster, your supervisors are actually able to focus on those true edge cases or those true expectations. And then your QA shifts from constant rework to actual insight that you can within the claims process. So if you can clean up your decisioning, it doesn't just speed things up, it will remove that fear. And then once your fear is gone, everything else in the process just kind of falls into place.
Wow. It's almost like I just imagine having a big whiteboard session where you literally just go through your whole decision tree and just circle, do I need a human or not? And it could be as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really big. And in this, I mean, change is scary, right? It's always scary. When you're thinking about making these kinds of changes, how do you know if the new process or the digitization that you're creating is better or just different?
Yeah. See, if there's it's pretty practical things that you can look at. So first you have to look at, is it faster? Not necessarily on paper, but actually in real life. Are you seeing those claims actually moving through the system with fewer stops, fewer handoffs, less follow-ups? Mm-hmm. Second, is it clear? Do the examiners know exactly what's expected of them, what decision they're empowered to make, and when do they actually need to escalate it up higher? If they're still relying on, checking with other people or the knowledge that is in their head just in case, that process still isn't clear enough.
Yeah.
And then, does it actually reduce your rework? Are you seeing fewer corrections and fewer reopened claims, fewer downstream fixes? If errors are just moving to a different stage within the process, you haven't improved anything. And then there's that one non-negotiable test that you have to do. And, I already touched on it earlier, is would an examiner choose this process if they had the option today? And if your answer is no, if they're still finding a workaround, is there still, a bunch of spreadsheets, or you hear we're asking for the old way or the manual way, your transformation's not done and you need to start going back through it again. You need to have a better process and it needs to be adopted, because once adoption happens, that's when it actually works.
Yeah. Because if it's not adopted, it's just another thing that's sitting there and not being.
Mhm. Yep.
That's huge. It seems like, I mean, a really big theme throughout all of this is outcomes. I mean, you can't tell if the new process is better if you didn't actually identify what the outcomes are supposed to be.
Yep.
Otherwise, again, you're just digitizing something that already exists. You're not actually making anything better.
Mhm.
I guess tying it all in, coming for a landing, if people were to take away just one thing from today's conversation, what would you want it to be?
I think the message has been pretty clear. Don't automate your past, design your future. Technology is never going to fix a process that you don't understand or something that you're afraid to question. Your transformation is going to start when you actually slow down long enough to ask the whys. And you have to have the courage to remove those processes that no longer serve you. And also, you need to design your workflows around outcomes and not necessarily habits. So if you remember nothing else out of this, just remember that every manual step earns its place in the process. Every rule should be intentional, and every process needs to make life easier for the people doing the work and the people that are waiting on it. So if your platform is just going to mirror how you worked 10 or 20 years ago, you didn't transform. You really just digitized your comfort zone. So if you go into that, that's the shift that you're going to make from digitization to true transformation.
Well put. I feel like we need a mic drop or something. Awesome. Well, I can't add anything to that. There you have it, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining our Claimversation today. We'll join you guys again next month. Until then, have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.